Hello, my friend. Welcome to this week's episode of the Consciouspreneur Journal. This is Ahmed, your host and founder of the Voice of the Entrepreneur podcast. And let me tell you, this week I am super excited about this episode. This week we got a special topic for us, something that I have been wanting to talk about for a while now. And I have invited Shanann, who joins me on these Consciouspreneur Journals, to really dive deep into some topics that you don't really hear about that much. So today the topic that we're going to talk about is something that is seldom associated together, and those are creativity and productivity. Usually when we think of being productive, we don't associate that with being creative, right? Usually when we think about being productive, we think about efficiency. We think about having tried and tested methods that get us or that make us as productive as we can. We don't think about being creative to be as productive as we can. And why is it that creativity makes you productive? And that is really the topic of this conversation today, is how does creativity accelerate that productivity? When we talk about being creative, we talk about something called being in the state of flow, where there's almost this disassociation with time. Many people have said that when I was doing that or when I was doing this, that I was feeling as if time was flying by. And that is the disassociation with time that creativity can induce on an individual. So being in that flow, creativity can be one of the greatest tools or one of the greatest powers you can have to be as effectively productive as possible. And we're going to talk in detail about how that creativity brings about productivity in this conversation. But being a little bit more specific, we're going to talk about how creativity allows you to invest emotions in your work and really invest yourself in your craft or the work that you're producing. Also, how creativity is an impersonal power. And it is available to us all, and it's not a power that is reserved for the special. I mean, believe me, when I was younger, I used to think that creativity was something that was reserved for the special people. It was reserved for the people that were creative, quote unquote, creative. And I did not think that I had that power because I just didn't think that I was special or intelligent enough that I would be creative. But as I grow older and as I realize more about this, that is just not true. Creativity is something that is available to us all if we're willing to tap into it. Also, creativity can be a vehicle to manifesting your genius. And what do I mean by that? I mean that when you allow creativity to flow through you, the most genial part of you can live through that creativity and can find expression through the craft that you practice. Also, creativity allows you to step outside of the realm of thinking and be more available to life. Now, this one is one of the most juiciest points here. And you're going to see when we talk about this topic how allowing yourself to be creative really taps into the beauty of what life has to offer. And then, of course, finally, we want to talk about how reminding yourself to be curious and to stay curious is one of the best ways to be productive. So my friend, I hope you enjoy this conversation. Listen to it carefully. Take notes because there's some really good information that both Shanann and I share in this one. And if you have any questions or comments about what we discuss in this, please go to the Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/voice of the entrepreneur and start a discussion with whatever thoughts you have in mind. And the entire community benefits from interactions and discussions like this. So without further ado, here it is, my friend. Shanann, creativity in my work has been a huge component, obviously, because creating the podcast, doing the interviews, doing the videos, writing blogs, writing articles, talking to people, doing the speeches, all that stuff requires a lot of creativity. And I want to share my perspective on how creativity has been able to help me be more productive and the other side of creativity that actually sometimes can even hinder my productivity. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But first and foremost, I think creativity is so powerful when it comes to productivity for me, because creativity allows me to be emotional about my work. And what I mean by that is when I'm creative, when I am doing something that requires me to be creative, it automatically links into an emotional side of my psyche. There is an emotion that's attached to that work, and it makes me very excited about it. So when I am emotional about something, my creativity automatically flows. Then the whole concept of productivity almost doesn't even fit in there, because it's just a natural flow of creating something. And productivity is kind of like the byproduct of what's happening. So the more creative things are, so the more creative I become in creating the things that I want to, the more that I can produce. Now, I'm not talking specifically about quantity of the things that I create, but the quality more. I think to me, productivity, when it's about the quality, is so much more heavy than the amount of work that you can do. The other piece of it that's also interesting is that creativity sometimes actually stresses me out. And the reason I say that is because of this. So every time I record a podcast, I do an interview, I have to go back and I have to come up with something that is creative at the moment. That's creative writing. I have to produce that. I have to put it on paper. I have to record it, all that good stuff. And sometimes having that pressure of coming up with something creative actually makes me want to procrastinate. So it actually pulls me back and my productivity goes down because I feel like I have to do it. Although I love doing it, but there's still that attachment of I have to do this. When I don't have the feeling of I have to do this, then it is so much more powerful because there's no attachment to losing something if I didn't do it, or there's no. And also the reason for me that applies is because my number one value is freedom. So I understand how this links into it is if I have to do something, and even if it's creative work, my productivity is going to suffer. So that's kind of the perspective of how I see creativity and productivity link with each other in my work.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I do share a lot of what you've just said. I look at productivity as the same way. It is a byproduct. And when I focus on being productive, I seem to have less hours in the day. I seem to have less minutes in the day, in the hour. And I seem to be in a place where I'm just feeling backed up and overwhelmed and forcing myself to get, productive. And that's when I focus on being productive. But when I focus on being creative, all of a sudden it's like, okay, I can slow down, I can take a deep breath, I can relax a bit, and I can let the creativity guide me. And my productivity shoots through the roof in those moments that happens. So I do share that perspective. Now, I also see creativity as, well, I'll share something with you. Like for most of my life, I never thought I was a creative person, right? Like I would say from age 11 to 30, like, so, most of my juiciest parts of my life.